Hey guys, welcome back. Trying a new thing out here. We're not committed to it yet. Consider this like a pilot of possibly, potentially, a new series I may do. This is totally impromptu tonight. Have not gone over any of the format. I've only told Joe what I was going to kind of announce at the beginning of this, so we're going to keep this completely informal tonight and just let the conversation go where it may. Here's why I'm doing this, because I've had several people ask me to go over the fundamentals of bourbon and all of that, and I don't know where to start. And I think it's going to be helpful to have someone to have a conversation with. So let's get to it right after this. All right, guys, to kick this off, Joe and I had a little conversation during the break, and you know, he's got a million questions about bourbon, but I want to ask him one first, because before we can get started on this, I need to know, Joe, what do you know about bourbon?
Well, I know that there are such things as fruits in the bourbon, and is such thing as wood in the bourbon, but I don't know how to smell them. So on a scale of 1 to 10, I'd say maybe a 2.
Okay.
If not 1.5.
Well, and just to level set, there are no fruits in bourbon. There's fruit notes in bourbon.
Fruit notes, okay.
Fruit
there
notes.
You go. See, I learned something.
So before we get started, let's go over, and I know I've done this before on other videos, but there's much more to it. Bourbon has to be, by law, 51% or more corn in the mash. And the other grains have to be cereal grains. So typically you're going to see barley, rye, and wheat. And a lot of times you'll see them list malted barley. Do you know what malted grains are? Okay, to malt a grain, what they do is they take a fermented or a fertilized grain, and they start putting it in this temperature until just before it sprouts. And then they stop that process, and it's called malted, and then they use it, and what it does is releases more sugars, releases more flavors in the grain. The typical one that is malted more than others is barley. Gives it more of a nutty flavor. Wheated bourbons, there is no really legal definition of like a wheated bourbon or a high rye bourbon. What the law is bourbon has to be 51% or more corn in the mash, which means predominantly corn. It can be, the rest of it can be rye. But typically when someone says like a high rye bourbon, it's between 20%, 35% rye, somewhere along in there, maybe 36% like Four Roses. Rye gives it more of a spicy kick, peppery. So when you're picking up black peppers, allspice, Christmas spices and stuff like that, a lot of time that's attributed to the rye count. In the bourbon. Wheated bourbons are softer and sweeter, but a lot of the flavors that you get out of bourbon don't actually come from the grains, they come from the wood. So when they char a barrel, and legally it has to be aged in new charred oak barrels. So there has to be some sort of char in there. And we won't go into all the different levels of char. Okay. But the heavier the char doesn't necessarily mean a better flavor. So like a number 4 char, number 3 char, number 6 char. But sometimes they'll toast the barrel. And what that means is they don't like just char blast it with fire. They slowly heat the barrel until and let it. It's sort of like when you bake a pie in the oven and you look and it's white on top, and then later on it slowly turns brown. Mm-hmm. And a lot of distilleries have started going to that slow toasted barrel, which chars the barrel eventually, but it brings out more of the wood sugars. And that's where you get your vanilla and caramel from. And that with the grains produces kind of an apple-y note to it. And then you can go from apple to apricot, pear, whatever else you can pick out of it. But
is it more expensive to make it that way?
It is. It takes longer. but if you're not set up for it, yeah, it's gonna, you have to, because a lot of times, like some of the distilleries, the old style was, they would have this like flamethrower thing. And the barrels were on this belt, not really a belt, it was more like they were just rolling between like slanted bars. And they had a release, and it would let this barrel roll off, and then it would catch the next barrel, and it would be lined up with this like flamethrower thing. And it would ignite for so many seconds. And whatever number char they wanted, that's where they set it to the duration of the blast. And then it would stop, and that barrel would come down, the next one, and they'd blast it. So, that's kind of, there's other methods to do it, but that's the old school way. But I know, I think it's Rabbit Hole Distillery. They do a slow toast on their barrel. But a lot of those notes, it's just, and the different corn varieties that they use, the different wheat varieties, where are you procuring your grains? Where are they being grown? What's the soil content? All of this stuff, what variety of wheat, all of this stuff imparts different flavors on bourbon.
So you said there was 51% corn.
Mm-hmm.
Do they ever put more corn in there?
Oh, yeah. Let's see, Hudson Baby Bourbon. They've discontinued Hudson Baby Bourbon. It was 100% corn. And there's other ones out there. And then there's like blue corn and different, and blue corn's not blue, but they call it, it's a variety of corn. They call it blue corn. It's a white corn. Gives it a much different flavor. Hudson Baby Bourbon I know it was 100% corn, and now they have the Bright Lights Big Bourbon made, and that's their new one. It's 95% corn. Wow. So it's still very high corn content. Yeah. But yeah, it just has to be the predominant grain. Here's another one for you. Tennessee whiskey could be called bourbon. So Jack Daniels and Uncle Nearest and other Tennessee whiskeys, it's just pride of hometown pride. Mm-hmm. They want to call it a Tennessee whiskey. But legally now the only thing they do is they filter in like a charcoal filter method. I forget the name of the method, but y'all can Google it. But it's neither permitted nor not permitted in bourbon. It's not a part of the law. So, but they want to have their own product. But every bourbon out here, right here, is called a straight bourbon. All of these are Kentucky straight bourbons, except for this one is a Texas straight bourbon. But there is no state designation. It's a United States federal law. So, straight bourbon, so the difference is bourbon has to follow all of the laws, but there's no aging on just plain bourbon, right? So you can get bourbon aged 3 months, but straight bourbon has to be aged at least 2 years, and it should be aged 4 or more. If it's between 2 and 4 years, they have to put the age statement on the bottle. So if you get a straight bourbon whiskey with no age statement, by law, it has to be aged more than 4 years. Wow. Because there's no statement on it. But if they say this is a straight bourbon whiskey aged 2 years, 8 months, it's still legally a straight bourbon whiskey, and they follow the law by putting the age statement on there. And then we can get into blended bourbons. Now, well, what else do you want to know?
I want to know which one we're going to try tonight. We're going to try one tonight?
We can. You know what? I have some very good bourbons on this table. Now, this is a very hard to get one. This is the 1792, but this is sweet wheat. So this is the 1792 wheated straight bourbon whiskey. This is, I forgot, Garrison Brothers from Texas. Now this is their small batch, Texas straight bourbon whiskey. Very coveted, very good bourbon. I have a Calumet 15 year. I will tell you, most of the bourbons on this table are either over $100 or very hard to get. All right. So this one is one of my favorite from Old Forester. This is the 1920. Very good bourbon. You pick. Which one do you want to go for? The Buffalo Trace. Now, Buffalo Trace, not expensive. This is like $36, but you can't find it. You know, and around here, you have to ask for it. They're not going to put it on the shelf.
Really?
Yep. Because what it is, and I've heard, I'm just going to pour a little in case you want to try another one. All right. I'm going to pour me a little so I can remind myself of the Buffalo Trace here. And I meant to pour you even less, but I'm going to pour me just a tiny bit because I have to keep my head straight so I can impart all of this knowledge that I have. All right. Cheers.
To you.
Yep. This one, you can tell it's soft.
Yes,
right?
very.
Very soft. It's not a ton of flavor to this, but the flavors you get are earthy. I call this the good old campfire bourbon, you know, around the campfire. And it's not expensive.
And it like burns your tongue on the way down, where a lot of them burn your tongue right when you sip it.
Yeah, you kind of get used to that after a while, but I don't feel that. But this one doesn't even give me a hug. And when we talk about a hug, we're talking about the warmth coming down to the stomach, you know, and you feel like you're getting a nice warm hug. I get no hug off of Buffalo Trace. But I'm picking up, of course, it's Buffalo Trace now. We're going to pick up the vanilla, the apple, you know, things like that. But the deeper notes in that are grassy. And it's not as sweet as some of the other bourbons. Now, the most expensive bourbon, and price doesn't always qualify a bourbon as being great. But the most expensive one here is this one, Elijah Craig 18 year. And that's just because it took so long to freaking age it. But it did age well. And it does have the mouthfeel on it.
So do they use the toasted barrels?
No, well, no, Elijah Craig, I don't know. That is basically select barrels from regular Elijah Craig. You know, but they select them and go, oh, these are nice. We're going to let them age longer, you know, type thing. So it is select barrels that are aged, that's standing up to the age. You know, because you can overage a bourbon. It just depends on the mash and what what it's being distilled for. Another part of that bourbon law, oh yeah, that is tasty. Another part of that bourbon law is there's called neutral spirits and things like that. They have no color. They don't have to be aged, like vodka and gin and things like that. But they can be distilled at 180 proof. But whiskeys like this have to be distilled at no more than 160 proof. And these can't go into the barrel higher than 125 proof. And I think we've discussed this.
Does it go up in the barrel? I mean,
yeah,
proof?
it does. It will, because water will soak into the wood and leave the alcohol more concentrated behind.
Okay.
So that's why you can get 126 proof in the bottle, 132 proof in the bottle, because, and like that Heaven's Door, they may have even proofed it down just a touch, because it does not say barrel proof on it or cask strength. So it could have come out at 134 or something, and then they kind of watered it down a little, you know, to proof
I know I had to water it down a little.
Yeah. So let me talk about blended bourbons for a second.
Okay.
There's a misnomer out there about blended bourbons. So we know that straight bourbon is very tight on the rules. But a blended bourbon can contain neutral spirits or other things. It can contain other whiskeys. Part of the bourbon law is you can't add color to bourbon. It can only get its color from the wood. It's not true for blended bourbons, because you can add scotch to a blended bourbon. You can add vodka and you know, but if you're adding another whiskey to a blended bourbon, you're adding the color of that other whiskey. So if scotch is not regulated and color can be added to scotch or Irish whiskey, and you use those whiskeys in a blend of blended bourbon, the blended bourbon has to be 51 or more percent straight bourbon whiskey. But after that, usually, typically though, in most of the blends of bourbons, you're going to see them blending with other bourbons. And then if there's an age statement, it has to be, because I have blends of straight bourbon whiskeys, which means they only blended other straight bourbons, but you have to put the age of the lowest bourbon used. So even if I used a 9-year straight bourbon, a 6-year straight bourbon, and a 2.5-year straight bourbon, I have to put the age statement of the 2.5-year because it didn't hit 4. So the age has to be listed. So that's what you get into. And typically what they'll do to combat people thinking that's the entire age is they'll list the age of every bourbon used. They'll say, oh, this consists of a 9, a 7, and a 2.5. You know, because they don't want to make you think, oh, I'm picking up this bottle and it's 2.5 years old. Well, no, it contains other. But they don't tell you necessarily what percentage is used. So they could use 80% of the 2.5 year, 15% of the 6 year, and 5% of the, you know, but it's a blend.
Pretty cool. I never knew about that.
All right. So, notes. Let's talk about notes. Because I know we were talking in the break and you said you wanted to know about like the wood notes and things like that.
Yeah, I didn't call them notes, so you had to correct me.
Okay. The flavors, whatever it is. And the reason we call them notes is because I don't taste through my nose, but I can pick up the notes on the nose, but I can pick up those similar notes on the palate, right? So if I say, you know, flavors and aromas, I'm using two different things. Notes just combines the two things together. So it's not like a hard, fast rule, but yeah, I'm picking up aromas and then flavors, you know, on the tongue. But the one of the best things, and I'll let you try it out, is I'm giving away a nosing kit. And so if you join my live every Thursday night, I have an entry onto the wheel. And if you're in your visors, you can look over that way and see the board. And this is my normal studio right over here. We're set up beside the studio in this format. But I'm doing a 24-note nosing kit. And in that nosing kit, I put new oak and toasted oak in that nosing kit. And what I do is I put a little vodka in there with it because it's kind of neutral, and vodka doesn't have very much of an aroma, but it will extract the aromas out of whatever it is. That's how they make vanilla extract and things like that. Is they put you can make homemade extracts by putting vanilla beans in vodka and letting them sit there until it extracts all of that out, and you smell it, and wow, that smells like vanilla. And so I do the same thing, but I do it with tons of things like raisins and like dried fruits, like, fresh apple and things like that, and cinnamon and different things. And just smelling of cinnamon, like opening up your allspice and smelling it. It's different when you put some of it in the jar and then put a cap full of vodka and seal it. Mm-hmm. It changes that aroma just a little bit, and it's changing it to what it smells like when there's ethanol mixed in with it. And no one wants to sit around and chew on a piece of oak. But when I put it in this nosing kit, it will extract. It does. The vodka's doing to that wood what bourbon does to the barrel, and it will color the vodka because it's aging with that wood then, and it's extracting those sugars out and all that, and that will give you a very strong one note. Then you can smell of that and say, am I picking it up in this or not? And that's where you train yourself to be able to pick those notes out.
That looks like the easiest way.
It is.
Yeah, definitely.
No, there was a video, Oji-san's World, Jimmy from Oji-san's World. And I went to Arkansas, excuse me, to visit my parents. And he was there. We met up. We went to a couple of liquor stores and things and hung out for a little bit. But he won the first nosing kit I gave away. Well, actually, Todd from 21090 won the nosing kit, and then he spun for it on his show on YouTube, and Jimmy won it. So Jimmy did a review, and I've linked that in my community tab on my channel. And so if you want to go down in there, you can see the eye-opening experience he had by trying different bourbons and then opening up the different things and writing down the notes he was getting or stacking them up, saying, yeah, I get this, I don't get this. And he was picking out 12 to 16 notes out of different bourbons. And some of them, you know, you're going to get more dominant notes and more, you know, subtle notes. But hey, that's what the journey's all about. It's like picking out the good stuff that you like.
It takes a while to get the subtle notes, right?
Yeah. So what are we trying next?
No, I'm good for right now.
Good for right now.
Yeah.
Well, me too, because these are expensive. So
That's the same thing I was thinking.
no, but we'll try one more before we cut this off. Any one you want. I mean, for me, the 1920 is exceptional from Old Forester. But so is the Calumet 15. I mean, it is fantastic as well. Let me go ahead and pour a little bit of this. I won't pour quite as much as I did last time. This one again is well under 100. It's about $80, I think, somewhere along in there. But if you can find it, but it's just when you go, you're lucky if you see it on the shelf. It's usually the spot on the Murderer's Row Old Forester series. This one's the empty slot on the shelf because you didn't get there in time to grab a bottle of it. You know, there's all the other dates, but this is a really, really good bourbon that is attainable if you get there on time and ask them about it. You'll find a lot more notes in that than you're going to find in that Buffalo Trace.
Yeah, that's the one that burns right off the bat. It's good.
No, it's fantastic, and then
It's really good.
yeah, it's sweeter, a little bit sweeter than the Buffalo Trace, and it's got that herbal tea notes in it that gives way to darker, you know, woody notes on the back end, and that toasted barrel note you get on there. It's a fantastic bourbon. So what else? Oh, where?
I thought of a quick question.
Okay.
What's the most expensive bottle of bourbon you've ever bought?
Oh, that Elijah Craig 18 year. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. Now
I was
bought,
expecting you to say, "Oh yeah, it cost $1,200."
No. I started my channel to be affordable bourbons. You know, bourbons that is supposed to be an average bourbon guy show. You know, and I'm not the pretentious guy. I mean, I'll
not
sit
at all,
here
definitely.
and I'll drink the old tub as fast as I'll drink anything else, and that's like $20 on the shelf because I think it's a good bottled and bond bourbon for what it is, for the price. And I tear bourbons up when they're overpriced, you know. And I think Booker's is pricing themselves out of the market now.
Really?
Yeah. That Booker's and Little Book and all of that. And Booker's, they hit one good little note, you know, here on a few Bookers, and people were raving over them, and they started jacking the price up. But if you're going to jack the price up, then don't ever go below the bar that was set on that one good one you put out. you know, and I'm not ready to hit or miss on a $90 bourbon. You know, if I'm going to spend that much money, I want something I know is consistently good every time. And it will take me there every single time.
I agree. Yeah, that's
You
good.
know. Yeah, some of those I'll wait for the review. Now, other ones like that, Elijah Craig, barrel proof, that happens to be the B520. There's been some other releases come out that are notably in the range of how good that one was. But for me, that's the best one they've ever put out. I've tried the other, you know, because they do A's and B's and, you know, C's. And, you know, they roll back around to the B521s and things like that, you know, and roll through. And people talk about the A's and, you know, oh, this one was okay and that one was okay. But this was the one that got all the acclaim, you know. And I appreciate the fact that they haven't just jacked the price up because they had a one-hit wonder, you know. So, and I'm not saying that it's a one-hit wonder, but you know, it's like golf. You know, if you're playing golf, it's like skill puts you close, but luck puts the ball in the hole from a tee, like a par 3. But otherwise, every golfer out there would make a hole-in-one on every par 3. You know, skill puts you in a position where you can get lucky and have the ball fall in. And every once in a while, Elijah Craig will hit a drive and the ball will fall straight in the hole. You know, but that's your hole-in-one, you know. But you can't expect every bottle to be a hole-in-one. And that's what a lot of people like about like regular old Jim Beam. Regular old whatever. It's like, I know what I'm going to get. I know what to expect. And I don't want to venture away from that. But when you do that, you're cheating yourself out of discovery of things that are fantastic. Yeah, I break a few eggs to make an omelet, but you know, I've spent money. But every single bourbon I've bought, even the ones I don't give great reviews to, I'll still drink them. I just think they were overpriced for what I got, you know. But I'm not going to let them stale on the shelf, you know. So I hope this conversational thing is working for us. I think that might be enough to cover in this episode.
I think so too, yeah.
And I'm going to let people decide. And please leave comments down below. Did you enjoy this? And give us questions. And, you know, let me know what questions that you have that you would like answered on here. And we'll chit chat about it, and I'll tell you what I know. And I will always tell you when I don't know something, I will say I'm not sure about this, or I don't know, but I think I heard something. But if I do that, Google it. You know, look it up for yourself. But
that's very rare, though. Very rare.
Well, I mean, I don't know exactly. I will tell you this: bourbon, and this is how I remember it. Bourbon officially became named as a law in May 4th of 1964, because May 4th is my birthday. I was born in 69. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up. As always, guys, please like and subscribe. Hit the bell down there for notifications, and I promise I'll keep bringing you these videos.
Good night, everybody.